The bar was almost empty. Only the low hum of the old beer cooler and the ticking of the clock above the shelves kept the silence company. Neon signs flickered against the rain-streaked window, sputtering like they too were ready to call it a night. Elena wiped down the last counter, her movements slow, deliberate. She didn't hurry anymore. What was the point? Nights here always ended the same, with her alone, staring at bottles that had outlasted marriages, dreams, and sometimes lives. She tossed the rag into the sink, listening to the dull slap of wet fabric. Another long shift. Another round of half-heard stories from broken men who sat on her stools, trading cash for whiskey and silence. Her customers never knew how much she hated silence. When the laughter ended, when the jukebox switched off, when the door shut for the night, that was when her ghosts came back. Her brother's face, pale and bloody on the kitchen floor. The ring her ex-fiancé had slid across the table before walking away. The sharp, unshakable truth. She was the one left behind. Elena took a breath, squared her shoulders, and grabbed the keys. Lights out, doors locked, she murmured. Her ritual. If she repeated it enough, maybe she wouldn't hear the whispers in her head. Across town, another ritual played out. Diego sat in the driver's seat of a black sedan, engine idling low. The gun resting on the passenger seat gleamed under the glow of a streetlight. He stared at it without emotion, like a man looking at a toothbrush, an object of daily necessity. Stripped of meaning long ago. His last job had been messy. They always were. He told himself he didn't remember faces anymore, but the truth was, he did. Especially the eyes. Eyes of men who begged. Eyes of men who cursed. Eyes of men who saw him as death made flesh. He had once been a boy who believed in family. That boy had died the day his own family was buried because of cartel debts. Now, Diego carried out orders for the same machine that had chewed him up, because survival was the only choice they'd left him. He rubbed his hands together, cracked the stiffness out of his knuckles. The night was heavy with rain, and he wasn't ready to go back to the apartment the cartel had provided, for walls, a bed, and silence. He couldn't stand the silence. That was when he saw the light in the bar window. Back at the bar, Elena flipped the open sign to closed. She let her fingers linger against the glass a moment, savoring the thought of sleep. But as she reached for the lock, a shadow moved outside. Her heart jumped. The streets were supposed to be dead at this hour. The door swung open before she could turn the key. A man stepped inside, rain dripping from his leather jacket. Eyes sharp and unblinking. He moved with quiet confidence, like someone used to being the most dangerous person in the room. Elena froze. Every instinct screamed at her to tell him they were closed. But his gaze pinned her, and the words caught in her throat. He walked to the bar, slow and deliberate, each step echoing in the empty room. When he reached the counter, he sat down, leaned forward, and said in a low, steady voice, "One last drink." The words hung between them, heavy as the storm outside. For a long moment, Elena just stared. She should say no. She should demand he leave. But something in his tone, something weary, almost broken, made her pause. Her hands moved on their own, reaching for a glass. "What'll it be?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. His lips curved in the faintest shadow of a smile. "Whiskey." "Neat." She poured, watching the amber liquid catch the neon light. Sliding the glass toward him, she caught his eyes again. Not cruel, not wild, haunted. He lifted the drink, held it for a moment like it was more than just liquor, like it was a prayer. Then he drank. Neither spoke. The silence between them was sharp, electric. Elena found herself both afraid and drawn in. Finally, she broke it. "Bar's closed, you know." He set the glass down gently, his fingers lingering on the rim. "Then maybe I'm not here for the bar." Her pulse quickened. She wasn't sure if it was fear or something else. Outside, the rain battered the windows. Inside, two strangers sat in the dim glow of neon, each carrying scars no one else could see. The bartender with her ghosts, the hitman with his sins, and with 4 simple words, one last drink, their lives had begun to twist together. The storm outside didn't let up. Rain streaked the windows like endless rivers, drowning out the hum of traffic, the shuffle of city life. In here, the world was smaller, tighter, just the two of them and the silence. Elena crossed her arms, leaning back against the shelves of liquor. She wanted distance. The man at the bar radiated something she couldn't quite name. Danger. Yes, but also a strange sadness. He swirled the whiskey in his glass, watching the way the liquid caught the faint neon glow. "This is good," he said quietly, voice gravelly, roughened by smoke or years of holding things in. "You sound surprised," Elena replied. He glanced at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Not a lot of good things in my world." The words lodged in her chest, sharp. She told herself not to care. He was a stranger. A late-night drifter, maybe worse. But his tone wasn't casual. It was heavy, confessional, like the whiskey had loosened a piece of armor. She shifted her weight, trying to sound light. "Well, congratulations. You found one." He gave a short laugh, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe." Minutes ticked by. The only sound was the faint clink as he set the glass down again. Elena thought about telling him to drink up and leave. But something stopped her. It wasn't just his presence, it was his eyes. Dark, watchful, but carrying something she recognized. Loneliness. She busied herself with rearranging bottles, but his voice cut through again. "Why are you here?" The question made her turn. "Excuse me. It's past midnight. You're alone. No one keeps a place like this running unless they're running from something too." The nerve. Her first instinct was to snap back. But when she opened her mouth, the truth slipped out instead. "Because I didn't have anywhere else to go." His gaze didn't waver. Same. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other. Two strangers suddenly bound by invisible threads. Elena forced herself to break the tension. "You ask a lot of questions for someone who just wanted a drink." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the bar. His presence felt heavier up close, but not threatening. More consuming. "Maybe I didn't come for the drink." Her breath caught. She hated the way those words stirred something inside her. "Then why did you?" she asked softly. His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. But then he muttered, "Because I'm tired of the silence." Something inside her cracked. She knew that silence. The kind that pressed down like a weight, filled with ghosts you couldn't drink away. Before she could think, she said, "Me too." He studied her, really studied her, like no man had in years. Not sizing her up, not undressing her with his eyes, just seeing her. It was unnerving, almost unbearable. Finally, he nodded once, as if he understood more than she wanted him to. He lifted the glass again. "To silence," he said. Her lips curved despite herself. She reached for a clean glass, poured a splash of whiskey, and held it up. To silence. The clink of their glasses was soft, but it rang louder than thunder in that empty bar. They drank together, and for a moment, Elena forgot she should be afraid. But then his phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. She saw something flicker across his face. Violence. Danger. A shadow of the world he came from. He silenced the phone without answering and shoved it into his pocket. Her heart pounded. She wanted to ask. She wanted to demand who he was, what he was doing here. But the part of her that was afraid warred with the part of her that didn't want this strange connection to end. So instead, she asked the safer question. "What's your name?" He hesitated. Then, "Diego." "Elena," she said before she could stop herself. For a fleeting second, it felt like the storm outside had quieted, like time had bent to make room for just them. Bottle between them was already half empty. Neither of them noticed that this night, which should have ended with a stranger leaving quietly, had already shifted into something dangerous. What they did notice was the spark, thin, fragile, but unmistakable, a spark that could burn them both. Elena woke the next morning to the rattle of rain against her apartment window. For a split second, she thought she had dreamed it all. The storm, the stranger, the whiskey shared in silence. But when she looked in the mirror, she saw the faint smudge of mascara under her eyes. The kind that came from staying up too late, talking too long. She gripped the sink. "Don't be stupid," she muttered to her reflection. Diego was dangerous. She didn't need to know the details. Everything about him screamed it. The way he moved like he was always calculating exits. The way his phone had buzzed with urgency. The darkness that crossed his face. And yet, she closed her eyes, pressing her palms to the cool porcelain. It had been years since someone looked at her like that. Like she wasn't just a bartender serving drinks, but a person worth seeing. And that was the problem. "Stay away," she whispered to herself. Across town, Diego sat in his car, staring at the same rain, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He hadn't slept. He could still see her face, hear the clink of glasses. The soft way she had said, "Me too." That tiny confession had undone him more than bullets or blood ever had. And that scared him. Feelings were weaknesses. He knew this better than anyone. In his world, attachments got you killed, or worse, got them killed. The smart thing was to forget her. To let the bar fade back into the blur of nights he'd never remember. But every time he tried, her eyes came back to him. Brown, steady, unafraid, even when she should have been. He slammed his fist against the wheel. She's not part of this, he told himself. Keep it that way. That night, Elena worked her shift like nothing had changed. She laughed at old jokes from regulars, poured drinks with steady hands, and kept her smile fixed. But every time the door opened, her heart leapt before she could stop it. And every time it wasn't him, she felt relief and disappointment knotted together. Halfway through the night, she caught herself glancing at the stool where he'd sat, the empty glass shelf behind it. She shook her head sharply. "No," she whispered. "You don't need this." But what whispered back? Diego stayed away for days. He buried himself in work, if you could call it that, driving, delivering, collecting, making people disappear. He was efficient, cold, the way the cartel needed him to be. But efficiency didn't silence the thought of Elena's voice. Soft but certain, because I didn't have anywhere else to go. He saw himself in her words. Saw the loneliness he'd been trying to drown for years. And it clawed at him. So he resisted the pull the only way he knew how, by pretending she didn't exist. Elena resisted too. She filled her mornings with errands, her afternoons with cleaning, her nights with work. She told herself she was fine. But sometimes, when the bar emptied and the neon flickered, she would hear that voice again, low, tired, asking for one last drink. And she hated how badly she wanted to hear it again. One night, near closing time, a group of drunk men stumbled into the bar. Rowdy, loud, the kind who mistook her tired smile for invitation. Elena handled them the way she always did, firm but polite, pouring carefully, keeping her distance. But when one of them reached across the counter to grab her wrist, something in her snapped. "Let go," she said sharply, yanking free. The man laughed, leaning closer. "Relax, sweetheart, just being friendly." Her stomach twisted. For a flash, she wished Diego were here. His presence alone would have ended this. She cursed herself for the thought. It wasn't Diego who stepped in. It was another customer. A quiet regular who told the drunks to back off. They left grumbling. But Elena's hands still shook as she wiped the counter afterward. Her chest ached. She realized it wasn't just that Diego had scared her. He had made her feel safe, too. And that was what terrified her most. Meanwhile, Diego sat in a safe house with two other cartel men, waiting for instructions. They laughed about a fight, passed a bottle, careless with their joyless jokes. He stayed silent, brooding, until one of them asked, "What's with you lately? You look like someone stole your favorite toy." Diego's jaw tightened. He almost snapped back. But instead he took the bottle, drank, and let their laughter wash over him. Because what could he say? That he couldn't stop thinking about a bartender who saw him as more than a weapon? That one night with her had shaken his entire existence. No, that was weakness. And weakness got people killed. So he kept resisting, even as the resistance tore at him. Elena closed the bar alone that night. The silence pressed heavier than ever, wrapping around her like a shroud. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and whispered to herself the words she didn't believe. "You don't need him. You don't." But deep down, she knew the truth. She already did. The storm had returned, wilder this time. Wind clawed at the windows of Elena's bar, rattling them in their frames. She was halfway through stacking chairs when the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into shadow. "Perfect," she muttered, grabbing a flashlight. She was about to lock up early when the door banged open against the wind. For a split second, she thought it was another drunk. But the silhouette that stepped in was unmistakable. Diego. Her breath caught. He was drenched, rain dripping from his hair and jacket, his expression sharp with urgency. "You need to lock the doors," he said, voice low and commanding. Her instinct bristled. "Excuse me." Now, there was something in his tone, an edge, but also fear. Not for himself. For her. Elena hesitated only a moment before sliding the deadbolt into place. "What's going on?" He scanned the bar, every corner, every shadow. "They'll be looking for me. And if they find me here." He trailed off, meeting her eyes. "You don't want that." Her chest tightened. "Who's they?" He didn't answer. The power outage made the bar eerie, lit only by her flashlight beam bouncing off bottles. The storm outside swallowed the world whole. "Why here?" she asked finally. He ran a hand through his wet hair. "Because it's the only place I wanted to be." Her throat went dry. Anger flared to cover the fear rising inside her. "You don't get to drag me into your mess, Diego. I didn't choose this," he shot back. "But I'm here, and if you want to live through tonight, you'll keep me here too." The words stung, but beneath them was something else. He hadn't gone to anyone else. He had come to her. They ended up in the cellar when headlights swept across the windows. Diego pulled her down the narrow steps, his grip firm but careful. "Stay quiet," he whispered, pressing her against the cool stone wall. His body shielded hers in the dark. She could hear her heartbeat, wild and loud. The storm raged above, muffling the sound of engines outside. For a long stretch, neither moved. His breath was hot against her ear, steady despite the danger. Elena whispered, "Who are you, Diego?" Silence stretched. Then he said, barely audible, "Someone trying not to be what they made me." Her stomach knotted. She wanted to ask more, to push. But the vulnerability in his voice silenced her. For the first time, she didn't just see danger in him. She saw a man trapped, fighting something larger than himself. Minutes passed, the danger outside drifting away. Still, Diego didn't move from where he stood, close enough for her to feel his warmth in the dark. When he finally did, it wasn't to step away, it was to whisper, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For bringing this to your door." His jaw tightened. "For not walking away when I should have." Her heart pulled against her caution. "Maybe I should have told you to leave that first night. Maybe you should have." His gaze locked on hers, even in the dim glow of the flashlight. "But you didn't." The air between them thickened. For a moment, the storm outside was forgotten. There was only this, two people who should never have met, pressed together by fate and fear. Eventually, they returned upstairs. The power was still out, the bar a cavern of shadows. Elena lit a single candle on the counter. Its glow was small, fragile, but it carved warmth into the darkness. Diego sat heavily on a stool, watching the flame. "It's been a long time since I sat anywhere and felt safe." Elena's chest ached at the word, safe. That was what her bar had always been for others, never for herself. "You're not safe here," she said quietly. He looked at her, eyes softer now. "I know, but I feel like I am." The honesty disarmed her more than any threat ever could. The storm dragged on into the night, trapping them inside. Elena made coffee on a gas burner in the back, bringing 2 mugs to the counter. "Not whiskey," he teased, voice lighter than before. "Whiskey's for drowning. Coffee's for surviving," she said, sliding a mug toward him. Their fingers brushed as he took it. Neither pulled away. For the first time, silence didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like a truce. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in the damp air. Morning light crept weakly through the windows of the bar, cutting across overturned stools and empty glasses. Elena poured herself another cup of coffee, though her hands were steady only because she willed them to be. Diego sat at the counter, silent, eyes fixed on the candle stub that had burned down to nothing. She couldn't shake the memory of the cellar, the press of his body against hers, the way his voice had cracked when he said, "Someone trying not to be what they made me." She wanted answers. She was afraid of them, but she needed them anyway. "Who are you really?" she asked finally. His gaze flicked to her, guarded. "I told you." "No." She set her cup down with a sharp click. "That wasn't the whole truth." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "Truth isn't safe." Her eyes narrowed. "And lies are." For a long moment, silence stretched. Then he exhaled, his shoulders sinking as if the weight was too heavy to keep carrying. "My family owed money. The cartel came to collect." His voice was flat, but his eyes burned. "They couldn't pay. I was 17 when they killed my father. 19 when they killed my mother. 20 when they gave me a choice. Join them, or die with my little brother." Elena's breath caught. "Your brother? Gone. Like the rest of them." He looked away. "So I chose to live. If you can call this living." The confession hit her like a blow. She saw it now, not just a hitman, not just danger, but a man scarred by choices no one should ever have to make. But her own scar throbbed in answer. "My brother," she whispered. "He was 22. Got mixed up with the wrong people. Cartel people. They found him in an alley." Her throat tightened. "I was the one who had to identify him." Diego froze. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Two paths of pain colliding in the dim light of a closed bar. Elena. His voice was low, raw. I didn't. She stepped back, as if distance could protect her. It doesn't matter if it was you. You're part of them. The same machine that chewed him up. His jaw clenched. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just sat there, silent, carrying the truth like a wound. The air between them was thick with ghosts. Elena's chest burned with anger, grief, and something she couldn't name. She wanted him gone, but when she looked at him, she also saw a boy forced into a life he didn't choose. She hated herself for the part of her that understood. You should leave, she said finally, her voice breaking. He stood slowly, his face unreadable. For a second, she thought he'd argue. But instead, he nodded. Maybe you're right. He moved toward the door, his steps heavy. Elena, he said, pausing at the threshold. I never wanted to hurt you. Or anyone like your brother. I don't know if that matters. She didn't answer. Couldn't. And then he was gone. That night, Elena scrubbed the bar until her hands ached. As if she could erase the memory of him. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. Not the killer, not the danger, but the broken boy who had lost everything. And for the first time in years, she let herself cry. Across town, Diego sat in his car, parked under a streetlight, gripping the wheel until his knuckles whitened. He had walked away, but he couldn't shake the look on her face. The pain, the betrayal. He told himself it was better this way. She was safer without him. But in the hollow silence of his car, he realized he had never felt more alone. The days after Diego walked out stretched thin and restless. Elena went through the motions, pouring drinks, wiping counters, smiling for customers. But the silence after closing was unbearable. She told herself it was better this way. Safer, cleaner. But her heart betrayed her every time she looked at the stool where he had sat. Every time she touched the bottle they'd shared. She wanted him gone. She wanted him back. Diego kept his distance too. He buried himself in cartel work. But his hands shook when he cleaned his gun. His focus scattered during meetings. Every alley reminded him of her brother. Every bar sign flickering neon reminded him of Elena's face when she told him to leave. One night, unable to take it anymore, he found himself parked outside her bar long after closing. The lights were off. Her shadow moved inside, cleaning as always. He sat there for nearly an hour, fighting himself, until finally he got out of the car and walked to the door. Elena startled at the knock. For a moment, fear gripped her. It could be anyone. Then she saw his outline through the glass. Her chest tightened. She almost didn't open it. But something stronger than fear pushed her forward. When the lock clicked, Diego stood there, rain-soaked again, as if storms followed him everywhere. I shouldn't be here, he said. You're right, she replied. Her voice was steady, but her hand lingered on the doorframe instead of pushing it shut. He met her eyes, something breaking in his. But I couldn't stay away. And with that, the door between them opened. Not just the wooden one, but the one in her chest she'd sworn she'd keep locked. They didn't talk much at first. Diego sat at the counter. Elena poured coffee instead of whiskey. They drank in silence, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was soft, like the pause before music starts. Eventually, she asked, do you ever regret it? The life you live. Every day, he admitted. His voice was raw, stripped of armor. But regret doesn't change anything. Maybe not, she said softly. But maybe it's where change starts. Their eyes held across the candlelit bar. For the first time, neither looked away. Over the next few nights, Diego returned. Always late, always quiet. Sometimes they spoke in whispers about trivial things, the music on the jukebox, the strange customers she'd had, the taste of coffee versus whiskey. Other times, silence said enough. One night, Elena laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. He had told a dry, unexpected joke about the way the bar's old neon sign buzzed like it was drunker than her customers. The sound startled them both. You should laugh more, Diego said. Not a lot to laugh about, she replied. He leaned forward, eyes warm. Then maybe I'll give you reasons. Her heart stuttered at the words. But their moments weren't always light. One night, Elena asked him about his first job with the cartel. He grew quiet, staring into his cup. I don't want you to see me like that, he said finally. She reached across the counter, her fingers brushing his hand. I already do. But I see more than that, too. His breath caught. No one had ever said that to him. No one had ever seen beyond the blood. And for the first time, He let himself believe he could be more. One evening, he walked her home after closing. The streets were empty, shadows stretching long under the flickering lamps. She felt safer with him beside her than she had in years. Though the irony wasn't lost on her, safety, wrapped in danger. At her door, they paused. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For making the silence bearable." Diego swallowed hard, fighting the urge to reach for her. Instead, he said softly, "You deserve more than bearable." Her breath caught. She wanted to close the distance, to see if the warmth in his eyes felt as real as it looked. But fear, of him, of herself, of what they were becoming, held her still. So she only nodded and slipped inside, her heart racing. For the first time in years, Elena dreamed of something other than loss. And for the first time in his life, Diego dreamed of something other than death. Together, they had found a fragile, impossible peace. But peace never lasted long. The air in the bar felt heavier that night, like the storm outside had seeped into the walls. Elena polished glasses out of habit, waiting for Diego, though she'd never admit it aloud. When he walked in, her chest lifted in that quiet way it always did now. But tonight, something was different. His steps were sharp, his eyes restless, his jaw tight. She noticed immediately. "What happened?" Diego dropped onto the stool, rubbing his temples. "They're watching me closer. The cartel doesn't like ghosts, Elena. And lately, I've been disappearing too much." She froze, the glass in her hand slipping slightly. "Disappearing to me?" His silence was answer enough. Her pulse quickened. "Then they know about me." He looked up sharply. "Not yet, but they will if I'm not careful." The weight of his words sank like stones in her chest. For weeks, she'd let herself believe their late-night coffees, their fragile laughter, existed in a bubble outside reality. But reality was knocking now, violent and merciless. "You shouldn't come back here," she whispered. His eyes burned. "Do you want me to stay away?" Her heart wavered. She should say yes. She should cut him off before the danger swallowed her whole. But her voice betrayed her. "I don't know." The door slammed open before he could respond. Two men walked in, broad shoulders, cold eyes. Tattoos that marked allegiance to the same cartel that owned Diego's soul. Elena's stomach dropped. She knew. She just knew. One of them smirked. "Heard this was the place you've been wasting your time, Diego." Diego rose slowly, calm but coiled. "You shouldn't be here." The other man glanced at Elena, his smile cruel. "So this is her. Cute." Elena's blood ran cold. "Leave her out of this," Diego said, his voice low, deadly. The first man laughed. "Relax. We're not here for her. Yet." His eyes lingered too long on Elena. "Boss just wants to remind you. You don't get to choose your distractions. Not without permission." The two men left with mocking nods, but the damage was done. Elena's hands shook as she set the glass down. "They know. They'll come back." Diego turned to her, his face taut with guilt. "I'll protect you." Her anger flared through the fear. "You brought this to my door, Diego? You, of all people, you knew what they are, what they do. And you still," her voice broke. "You should have never walked in that night." He stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. "Elena." No tears burned her vision. "You're a killer. That's what you are. That's what they made you, and maybe that's what you've chosen to be. But I can't," she shook her head. "I can't survive losing someone else to them. Not again." The words cut deeper than any bullet. Diego's breath faltered. He looked like she had struck him, but he didn't fight back. His silence was worse than anger. He turned, walked to the door, and paused only once. "I never wanted to hurt you. But maybe you're right. Maybe I should have stayed a ghost." And then he was gone. Elena collapsed against the counter, sobs tearing through her chest. She hated him for bringing danger into her life. She hated herself more for loving the man beneath the monster. For the first time since her brother's death, she felt truly broken. Diego drove aimlessly through the night, her words echoing like gunfire in his skull. "You're a killer. That's what you are." He had believed her when she told him he could be more. Now he saw the truth. He was poison to everything he touched. The wheel blurred under his grip as rain lashed the windshield. For the first time in years, he wondered if death would be simpler than living this half-life. The fragile bond they had built was shattered, leaving both drowning in the silence they had once escaped together. Elena hadn't slept in 2 nights. She moved through the bar like a ghost, wiping down counters that were already clean, checking bottles she didn't need to restock, anything to avoid sitting still, because when she did, his voice returned. Maybe I should have stayed a ghost. Every word replayed in her chest, hollowing her out. She told herself it was safer this way, that pushing him out meant protecting herself. But safety felt like emptiness, and emptiness was a worse kind of danger. Diego wasn't faring any better. He'd holed up in a cheap motel outside town, the kind with buzzing lights and paper-thin walls. His gun sat on the nightstand, untouched, but ever-present, like a reminder of the life chained to his back. He couldn't stop seeing Elena's face. The way her eyes burned when she said, "You're a killer." She wasn't wrong. But wasn't he also the man who made her laugh, who walked her home, who sat in the quiet with her when silence had been unbearable? Couldn't he be both? Or was he forever trapped in the blood on his hands? The cartel didn't give him time to dwell. A knock came on the motel door. Heavy, commanding. He stiffened, hand brushing his gun. "Boss wants to see you." A voice barked from outside. Diego swallowed. There was no ignoring this. Not now. As he grabbed his jacket, his mind went not to the cartel, but to Elena. If they knew about her, if they even suspected, she would be a target. He couldn't stay away. Not anymore. Meanwhile, Elena sat on her porch, staring at the fading sunset. She clutched her brother's old leather bracelet. Worn and cracked, the only piece of him she still carried. Her anger had dulled into ache. She hated what Diego represented, but she couldn't deny what he had given her: hope. Her brother had been swallowed by the cartel, but Diego had clawed his way through the same darkness to sit across from her. Broken but human. Could she forgive? Could she trust? Could she love him without losing herself? The questions gnawed at her, but in the hollow quiet, one truth rose above the rest. She missed him. Both of them stood on the edge of choice. Diego, to face the cartel or run forever. Elena, to open the door to danger or close it on love. Neither answer was safe. Neither answer was simple. But both knew the cost of silence was heavier than the cost of risk. That night, as rain began to fall again, both whispered the same words into the dark. "I can't let go." The rain came down in sheets that night, drowning the streets in silver. Elena was closing up the bar, her hands trembling more than usual. She told herself it was just the storm, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. She wasn't alone. The hairs on her arms rose before she even heard the footsteps. When she turned, 3 men stood inside the doorway, tattoos, cold eyes, and guns tucked too casually into their belts. Cartel. Her throat closed. Well, one sneered. "So this is the bartender that's got Diego soft." Her stomach twisted. Another leaned on the counter, grinning. "Boss wants to send a message. You don't mess with his men, and his men don't mess with strays." Elena backed away, her breath shallow. Her mind screamed Diego's name, though she hated herself for it. The door slammed open again. Diego. His presence filled the room like thunder. He was soaked, jaw clenched, eyes blazing. He didn't look at the men first. He looked at Elena. Just a glance. But it was enough. She saw the fear, the apology, the vow. "Leave her out of this," he growled. One of the men laughed. "You think you can play hero now, Diego? You're ours. You always will be." Diego's hand brushed his gun, but he didn't draw. Not yet. His voice was steel. "I'm done." The room stilled. "You don't walk away from this life," the leader hissed. "I just did." And then the world erupted. A gun went off. Elena screamed, ducking behind the counter. Glass shattered as bullets tore through bottles. Diego dove, firing back, movements sharp and desperate. 2 men dropped, wounded. The third lunged, slamming Diego into the shelves. The bar shook, bottles raining down. Elena's heart pounded as she crawled for the bat she kept beneath the counter. Her hands shook, but when the third man raised his gun at Diego, instinct took over. With a cry, she swung. The bat cracked against the man's arm, sending the gun clattering. Diego didn't hesitate. One swift motion, and the man collapsed. Silence. The storm outside howled, but inside, only ragged breaths filled the space. Elena stood frozen, bat still in hand. Diego's chest heaved as he looked at her, not with the detachment of a killer, but with the raw vulnerability of a man who'd almost lost everything. "You," her voice cracked. "You could have been killed." His gaze softened. "So could you. Because of me." She dropped the bat, tears blurring her vision. Why? Why risk it? He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, as if giving her time to push him away. "Because I'm done running from what I want." And Elena, His voice broke. It's you. It's always been you since that first night. Her chest caved under the weight of his words. Fear warred with longing. You're still them, she whispered. You're still part of that world. He shook his head. Not anymore. Not if I have a choice. Tonight was my choice. He swallowed hard. But I need to know if you'll make one too. Can you love me, even with all my scars? The storm outside raged, but in that moment, time stilled. Elena's breath shuddered. She thought of her brother, of the years of loneliness, of the laughter Diego had coaxed from her when she thought she'd forgotten how. She thought of how broken he was, how broken she was, and how somehow, in the cracks, they'd found light. Her hand rose, trembling, and pressed against his chest. His heartbeat thundered beneath her palm. Yes, she whispered. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. But yes. Diego exhaled like he'd been drowning and finally surfaced. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if the world could end and he wouldn't care. For the first time, the storm didn't scare her. Because in his embrace, she felt something she hadn't in years. Hope. They were far from safe. But they weren't alone anymore. The bar was quiet again, though its walls still bore scars from the gunfight, shattered bottles, bullet holes in the wood, broken glass crunching underfoot. But Elena wasn't trembling anymore. She sat at the counter, bandaging Diego's arm where a bullet had grazed him. Her hands were steady, her focus sharp, though her heart beat wildly with every brush of his skin. You should go to a hospital, she muttered. He gave her a tired grin. Hospitals ask questions. You'd be surprised how many bullets don't have clean paperwork. She rolled her eyes, but relief softened her features. You think everything's a joke? No, he said, his gaze lingering on her. Just the things that scare me. Their eyes held, and silence stretched. But it wasn't the silence of emptiness. It was full, alive, brimming with the things neither had dared to say until now. The next morning, sunlight poured into the bar for the first time in what felt like years. Elena leaned against the counter, sipping coffee, watching Diego pace. They'll come back, he admitted. The cartel doesn't forgive walking away. Her stomach twisted, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. So what now? He stopped pacing, his expression serious. Now? I disappear. For good. And I want you with me. Her heart stuttered. Disappear? I know a way out, he said, voice low. Safe houses, new names. It's not easy, but it's freedom. And it's the only way I can keep you safe. Elena looked around her bar, the place she'd poured her grief into, the place her brother's memory haunted every night. She thought leaving would feel like betrayal, but for the first time, it felt like release. She set her cup down. I've been hiding behind these walls for too long. Maybe it's time to live. Diego's eyes softened, hope flickering in their depths. Are you sure? Yes, she said firmly. If it means being with you, yes. That night, they packed only what they could carry. Elena left the keys to the bar on the counter, her hands lingering on them just a moment before letting go. When they stepped outside, the sky was clear, the stars sharp and endless above them. Diego opened the car door for her, but before she got in, she turned to him. One last drink, she asked softly, a teasing echo of that first night. He smiled, truly smiled, free of shadows. Only if it's with you. They clinked their coffee cups under the starlight. A simple gesture that felt like a promise. As the engine hummed to life and the road stretched out before them, neither knew exactly where they were headed, but they knew what mattered. They were together. And for two broken souls who had lived too long in darkness, love had finally found them. Unexpected, undeserved, undeniable. Do you believe love can truly change the course of someone's life, even someone broken, beyond repair? Share your heart in the comments and hit the subscribe button for more.